Harris and Greg Lehman, also Ann Dimmick, all are the people down at Watershed that have been so generous to us and have become our sponsors. A watershed moment might be pivotal, but it might also be quiet and fleeting. It could be a moment, occasion, a cause for celebration, an enormous triumph, or a small daily victory. A watershed moment could be a rekindling or an observance or gathering. Any opportunity to relish with friends and family. It's whatever you choose to cheers to, who you're gathered around, and whatever's worth celebrating. We founded Watershed Distillery on the principles of community in 2010. We wanted to live in, work in, and contribute to the community in which we grew up. We aimed to create spirits that stood apart in quality and character. Along the way, we set out to form a community of our own, one that could gather together to savor, celebrate, and enjoy good spirits and company. We've grown from a tiny little still and 2 guys in jumpsuits to a dedicated team of over 40 people and 2 much larger stills. If you're ever in the area, stop by so we can introduce you to our team and pour you some of our award-winning bourbon. Creating it was our watershed moment, but we want to hear about yours.
Steve Bartles, although his name is pronounced Bartels. Fuck that, I'm not from California. You get Bartles. That's what you get.
Yeah, it's not Bartels and James.
Right. Right. Where's all your partners night at, man? Where's your beautiful wife and all your buddies at?
Everybody's running around, and it's really weird. I got a new partner that I did the last time. He came on for the first podcast. I met him waiting in line at one of the. I pretty much every single Saturday get up early because I get up early anyways and go wait in line and give out Scotchy Bourbon Boy tickets or cards to everybody so that they listen and kind of get to know the people. And I met this guy a couple times, and he's done barrel picks at Buffalo Trace, and he kind of has the whole connection, and it's right up here in Canton. So we kind of hit it off, and so he's going to be part of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys now, and he's like a serious. He's gonna have a blast. You're gonna like him.
He's in. Yeah, I think that's actually the first way that I found out about you. Before you and I met, there was I was with Sean White up in Indianapolis, and I cannot remember the name of the store that was up there. But I picked the store when we first came out with the Lee Sinclair 2-year-old, and a dude gave me your card, and he might have gave me Steve Akeley's card at the same time. It's like, reach out to these guys. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's you just keep putting it around, and it's funny because you'll hand it out in places, and then it ends up in places that you've never been.
Yeah, 100%.
Or after, like, let's say we were at Heaven Hill waiting in line, and I gave out probably about 50 cards. Okay, talked to the people. We were there for like 5 hours. And I learned that when I'm done going into the line's done, everybody's out of the gift shop and everything, go back outside because there's going to be about 10 cards out there just laying on the ground that you got to pick back up, and you can always recycle.
Back up. Yep, I know what you mean. This is a funny story I'll tell you real quick. So Taylor Luther, I don't know if you know her, Evan Van Scoik, they're over in St. Louis. Back whenever we first really started hitting the podcast circuit with Spirits of French Lick. Circus might be a better word, but I was down in Kentucky for Bourbon on the Banks, that festival, and Sean White took me by Wild Turkey because he used to be a rep for Wild Turkey, and he wanted me to meet Jimmy Russell. I'd never met him before and all that stuff. We're standing in line waiting for a tour, and at the time there was an ABV Network contest going on, which was like win a day with a distiller, whatever, right? And it had already been won, and I knew the name of the people who had won, but I'd never met them, never seen their pictures, whatever. So we're standing there on tour, and this girl turns around, she looks at me, and she's like, "Oh, you're wearing a Spirits of French Lick shirt." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a distiller there." And she's like, "Oh, hey, I just won the contest to meet you tomorrow." And I'm like, what the fuck is this world we're living in where I just ran into you at fucking Wild Turkey just randomly and you're going to be hanging out with me at the distillery tomorrow, right? Just a small world, you know?
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to bourbon. And then, most people that are always swinging by the distillery are always swinging by somewhere else, and everybody's kind of it just keeps pulling people in, together. I'm looking forward to the bus trip. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I am too.
Because also I don't think you've met Greg Schneider yet, right?
No, I have not. I've talked to him a couple times online, but that's it.
Well, you're going to get to meet him, and I think it's really cool to have two fucking phenomenal distillers together, and you both do it differently, but understand exactly what you're trying to do.
Well, and he lives down in Albany, right?
Indiana? Yeah.
Albany? That's what we call it.
Okay.
Albany.
Yeah, I mean, he just, whatever, north of Louisville. What did they call it? Northern Louisville, even though it's Indiana.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there is no northern Louisville, right? It's the river.
You know the old Hoosier joke, don't you, about Louisville, don't you?
No.
You know who works in Louisville?
Who?
Hoosiers, and nobody would.
Hoosiers or nobody would. Yeah, there was a guy online talking about going to Louisville and all that, and then he was talking about all the people that he was watching get vaccinated right there on the street underneath the bridge.
Right. Yeah, all the little homeless encampments under the bridge. Yeah,
that are doing self-vaccinations. I don't know if you when I was there.
This side of the river, we just call that heroin.
Yeah, exactly. Super heroin.
Self-vaccination.
Yeah. They're just cleaning their blood.
Right.
Well, so it's just me tonight. Sorry.
It's all good.
But you guys, how much absinthe have you had?
A lot.
It looked like you had a lot.
A lot. Like, I don't know.
24 samples on the table plus multiple other bottles.
Yeah.
Where's
courageous dose is what I would say.
You guys are experimenting and to see if you can find the green fairy, right?
I think I'm past the fairy and towards a troll at this point.
Yeah.
That's what I'd go with.
All right. So once we get, I just want to quick I'll get the podcast started. We'll just on this one, we'll just keep it raw. We'll skip everything and just go straight to the podcast.
Perfect.
You might hear a little Morrison, and that's about it. I'll play your intro, and then I'll for the other people's stuff. I'll just take pre-recorded stuff and put it at the end for the. It's really cool that I got Log Still and the Watershed Distillery pulled on, and you're probably number one reason why I was able to do it, because that reading that you do at the start of every one of my podcasts makes it sound like I'm professional.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
How many times did you have to do the reading to get that?
I don't remember because I was drunk.
You did the reading when you were drunk. Holy shit.
Yes.
And were you drunk during the videos?
Possibly. Potentially, yes. You can always tell, Jeff. I'll tell you right now, if there's video, you can tell because I get that red fucking Santa Claus cheek thing going on, right? I got the red nose going on. Like, if you see that, you should just expect me to be full of shit.
I usually see it when you guys are when you're doing your videos, just telling everybody to fuck off. But
so when it comes out, mostly, just yeah.
And I respect it. That's for sure. Those are some damn good videos.
I appreciate it.
I mean, that last one.
Well, suspects it because there's been a lot of hungover drives to work, you know, with vomiting by the side of the road, just going, what are you doing with your life? What's wrong with you? I'll grow up one day, Jeff. Not today.
Okay. Not today, right?
Not today.
So,
Not at all.
I just want to, when we're talking, I want to just get real with distilling. That's it.
Yes.
So we could get started as soon as because I got to keep you lucid, right?
Right.
Well,
whenever you ask any questions you want to, brother. You know how I am. I'm open. So.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a shit ton of shit I don't understand, and hopefully you'll be able to take it the rest of the way so I kind of understand it.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm just gonna hit start recording. I gotta be quiet for 30 seconds while you read while the Maddie Gladden is gonna run. All right,
mute.
Here we go.
Spirits of French Lick is proud to introduce the Maddie Gladden Bottled and Bond Bourbon. This 4-year aged bourbon is double pot distilled and non-chill filtered and has a full-bodied mouthfeel with eucalyptus, molasses, clove, ginger, and slight citrus as well as grains of paradise. The finish is long and reappearing on the back of the tongue with notes of pepper, tobacco leaf, and mint cream. All of our spirits are available for tasting and purchase inside the French Lick Winery and Distillery. Spirits of French Lick. Respect the grain, please enjoy responsibly, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, tell you we must die. Tell you we must die. Tell ya, I tell ya, I tell ya we must die.
All right, we are here at the Scotchy Bourbon Boy podcast, and we have a special guest, Alan Bishop, the Master Distiller of French Lick Distillery. Hey, Alan.
What's up, brother? I'm an extra special guest tonight because I am absinthe fortified. So, you know, we're going to get some truth tonight.
We're going to get some truth. All right. Well, we'll just have to see how that goes. I'm gonna try and control myself, but you never know. I might not fucking be able to. And you know, it's just kind of. We are going to be beaten down in Kentucky in September, and I'm just so looking forward to that because I think that's just going to go right off the fucking rails.
I think so too. And let me also preface this conversation with, I'm not sure that you get to say that you're going to be under control tonight if you open your show with fucking whiskey bar, right? You're not. I mean, never once in my life, Jeff Mueller, have I ever sat down and thought, I'm going to listen to that, and things are not going to get strange tonight.
I mean, out of all the people, all the rock stars, he's one of the top rock stars that was completely out of fucking control. He kind of laid down out of control, right?
1,000,000%. And by the time he realized he had to get it under control, it was maybe a little bit too late, or maybe it wasn't, right? Maybe he did fake his death. I think you and I have talked about that a few times. I tend to have a belief that if Morrison's dead, it's within the past 4 or 5 years. That's what I think.
I would give it, because he was one guy that, you know, he wasn't an attention whore. He was the opposite. The part that was driving him to drink and pissing him off and keeping him fucked up was the fact that all that attention that he was getting nobody realized that he had talent, and
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, whatever, but he wanted to be realized for his talent, not to be a rock star.
It's a snowball effect, right? He's playing a character, right? And once you start playing that character, you have to one up that character every single time, whether you want to or not, right? But I also suspect that he was smart enough that he realized the feedback loop that he was in and thought, there's nothing good going to come out of this, right? Somebody that smart doesn't die at 27. I mean, maybe they do, but I don't believe in that version of events myself. I think it's a lot easier to retire and become an unknown artist somewhere and really enjoy people appreciating your work.
Not like he didn't have the money to disappear. He did.
Right. Yeah. What? 3 people saw the body? 3 people that you can't necessarily trust. I mean, one of which is a drug addict, one of which is his manager, and some random French doctor, right? So
Yeah.
you can't pay off the French doctor for sure because he's French. You're not gonna give him a couple $100 and go shut your fucking mouth.
and then they buried him so fucking quick that his parents couldn't even get across the ocean.
Nobody, like, they didn't even call his parents. They didn't call like the other doors or the quote unquote the dark doors. The guys he's working on films with at the time. Nobody came in and said,
"No,
yeah, that's him." Right. Now that said, I will tell you this, Jeff Muller. I have an altar in my living room, and I do have a stone on my altar from quote unquote Jim Morrison's grave, because why wouldn't you, right? You got to.
I agree.
Got to.
If I ever got there, I would, but I don't think I'm going to be going there anytime soon.
Oh, I don't know. I hear that you can buy them passports cheap. That's what I hear. I don't know that, but I'd say if you wanted one, they're out there.
I suppose, but just well, who knows? Maybe in about 5-6 years, I'll want to do it.
Yeah. Well, you let me know. I'll go with you. We'll dig him up. We'll see if he's there.
That would be an interesting evening, wouldn't it? We fucking some absinthe and then topped off with whiskey.
We'll podcast that whole thing. Not even particularly good whiskey. We'll just we'll bring good absinthe, all right, and we'll just bring Sazerac. Nothing keeps you more motivated than 90 proof average whiskey.
Right, Rebel Yell. We could do some Rebel Yell. Maybe Idol will join us, right? That's 90 proof average whiskey.
I'm in. I'm sold. Benji didn't say anything, but he's in. He'll come.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, let's go.
So, Benjamin, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Eaves with My Whiskey Den. We have a video, a YouTube podcast that we do where we really focus on craft whiskey, American craft, and love getting nerdy and deep diving on that. So along with my partners Patrick and Mike, and we have a lot of fun. So
awesome. So it sounds like you guys were having a lot of fun. We haven't covered how much fun you've been having already before this podcast, but you were mentioning sampling absinthe. Now, what absinthe are you sampling?
It'd be easier to answer what absinthe we haven't sampled this evening. So we had a little bit of was left over some homemade absinthe that was a prototype for what became Death in the Afternoon, although it's a little more punchy than Death in the Afternoon, from my buddy Jim Martin down in Key West Trading Company. So we drank a good little bit of that, and then I remembered that I had 2 boxes of samples that a friend of mine, Ron Rupert from up in northern Indiana, great, I don't know if he's okay with me saying this or not, I've said it before, so I'm going to just go ahead and say it, great home distiller, all right, great amateur distiller, excellent absinthe collector. He's sent probably, what were there, Benji, probably 24 samples, yeah. Different absinthes from the United States, France, some of the old Soviet bloc countries. Some of them really good, some of them really bad. There was really nothing that was in the middle. There was not one thing we tasted where there's like, right? It's either good or it's bad. There's no in between. So we've done we've at least done the Verte Absinthe tour of the world tonight for sure. And it was very much impromptu, just like Benji coming up. He's been hanging out the past couple days and kind of working at the distillery, doing a little job shadowing and trying to get into the industry himself. And I had every intention of coming home this evening. I had a new roll of copper. I've been doing a little still building on the side. I thought we'd get into that. And I came down to the basement. I looked around. I thought, no, we're just going to drink absinthe and hang out. Let's just go. I forgot I had those sample boxes and I got into them and I was like, now's as good a time as any. Let's do the absinthe wall tour.
And that was right.
That's the way it's got to work. And I find that there's so many times that you've got projects and you want to be productive, but just when you're not feeling it, you can't do it, because if you would have got into the copper, probably would have some fucked up shit would have happened or whatever. So you got to feel it. That's for sure.
I'd have probably made some bullshit that looked like a hamburger.
I saw
right?
it.
Just fucking stupid,
That's going right on top, right, of the big one?
Not anymore. It's not. So now this is the little less hamburger like, right? A little more like an urn, a little bit of a death shroud. So if you're gonna make absinthe on that still, it fits perfectly.
Almost, it looks like a dreidel. Spin it.
Yes, sir. You're not wrong.
So how many more hours? I mean, you put in a shit ton of hours on that, and honestly, when the main still looks, I mean, from a standpoint of visual, it's very appealing. Some of the other stuff that you were doing kind of looked like you were drunk making the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz, but it still was
The word that you're looking for, Jeffrey Muller, the word that you're looking for is the other things that you built look like shit. That's the word.
No, it didn't represent a still. I would have said it looks like, but it still looked like a still. But you even, your craftsmanship has just kept getting better. And I mean, everybody knows that copper welding is not an easy fucking job. That's for sure. No, any kind of welding.
Yeah. I don't know. I've got more hours in this than I practically should. I'll say that much. But Benjamin and I have had a couple of philosophical conversations about it. It's the same as playing music, right? We both play guitar, and you could sit down and you could learn a song from start to finish by any other band and go play in a cover band, and there's good money in that. You could have fun and it'd be nonchalant, whatever. But for me, it's much more, how can I express myself, whether it's right or wrong, with the methodology, as long as it's safe. The copper work is never going to be anything mainline. It's always going to be, I had a shitty Wednesday at work. I came home and I beat the fuck out of some copper and I made a thing that is halfway functional. Maybe it makes good spirit, maybe it doesn't, but I had fun doing it. And that's the fun of it for me.
When you're beating the shit out of it, it makes a good noise, right?
Oh yeah, there's a fantastic noise that comes out of this basement. There's a rhythm to it. You got it's a Johnny Cash song in metalwork.
All right, that's the way. And after, as you know, I was or still am an artist. But when you're learning your craft, as you get better and better, there's a lot of time and effort but there's no getting to where you want to go right away. There's no shortcuts, and that's what you're doing right here. You're going down the road to get to where you want to go, and there's no like there's no shortcuts. Now, you could, what would you say, bring someone in to work with you that's an expert at it and probably get on the interstate of this core thing, but that's not why you're in it. It's more, like you said, it's therapy, right?
Yeah, very much so. Like it would be very easy to just, print some patterns off the internet and make a standard Appalachian style pot still, right? Straight sides, the whole thing. And sell them and make money, but wouldn't be as much fun. You know, I wouldn't lay in bed at night thinking about how I could do it better. You know, I wouldn't think about like what happens if I hold the copper at this weird angle or that weird angle, or what if you throw stainless steel on top of this hand beaten copper fucking pot that just looks like it's been through hell already, right? And for me, that's the fun of it. You know, let's just take a raw piece of copper, let's take some rough measurements, see what happens with it. You know, maybe it turns out cool, maybe it turns out like shit. And the beautiful thing about copper is it's just expensive enough at this point that I can almost, not quite, Jeff, I might need your help with this. I can almost justify it to my wife as an investment, because even if it turns out as shit, I can sell it as scrap and almost get my money back. Just almost, right? It's almost precious metal at this point. So she's not quite convinced of that. So, you know, if you speak to her anytime soon, you might let her know, you know, all that copper that Alan's buying that you think he's quote unquote wasting, you know, that's an investment in your future.
And honestly, it could be.
It might be.
There's times when copper it goes up, and it was brand new. It was cheaper than what they're looking for. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I'll tell you the first, and I don't learn traditionally very well. I can't read a book and go off of that and do it. I have to do it my own way. But I'll tell you the first 3 sheets of copper that I bought, the scrap alone from those 3 sheets paid for a brand new roll. Legitimately. So you're not really losing money as long as you get something useful out of it, or you sell something, whatever. You're never really making money. You're breaking even. And I got a lot of good copper working friends, different states and everything, that do different types of stills. And I tell them, I don't know how in the hell you build anything and make any money off of it. You know, you look at somebody like Andrew Bailey, and of course those guys are TIG welding, all that stuff down at Cold Springs Copper Works. But by the time you figure out what you got into it with time and shaping and building the whole thing, and here's a functional still, and, you know, a beginner can run it from start to finish, and you're selling a 10-gallon with a thumper and a worm for $600, what'd you make off of it? $50? You know?
Well, that is art.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I'll have a piece of art and I'm selling it for $4,500, right? Yeah. I got 325 hours put into the thing, okay? And then when you're doing digital art, there's an expense because you have to get it onto the canvas, you know, print it out on the canvas. So I might have $500, $600, $700, depending on how big the canvas is, invested, plus all the paint that I then paint over the top, you know, brushes, everything it takes, you know, to be able to do it. And then, you know, when you divide that number into the amount of hours and everything you put into it, you're like making $8.50 an hour, and someone's going to look at that and think you're nuts, you know, and you're just going, well, you know, how much of my soul, what's my soul worth? Because that's what I'm putting into this.
How many of my hours at night laying in bed thinking about how I can improve this thing? You know, what's that worth to you, right? Like the hours that are your hours, right? Your moment of rest and your moment of zen and your moment of going into that deep sleep, you know. And that's the difference between consumerism and art, whether it's whiskey or copper work or painting, whatever, is, you know, Jeff, you're a good enough artist, you could easily paint, you know, whatever landscape, whatever local park, right? And here's a fucking pretty fucking Bob Ross fucking picture and $100, whatever. But maybe you paint that base painting and you're laying in bed at night going, I'm going to sell that tomorrow. But then you're laying in bed at night and going, I saw a fucking goose in the park today, and that goose is a bitch to fucking paint. But I saw that fucking thing, and it gives me a certain feeling. And tomorrow morning, God damn it, I'm going to get up an hour early and I'm going to paint that fucking goose. And what's that fucking goose worth? Right?
Yeah. I mean,
right?
It comes down to, and then what's really fucked up is you'll have your 350-hour painting sitting over there and then all of a sudden that goose, which you painted that morning in 2 hours, okay, and then somebody likes that goose and all of a sudden they'll pay $6,000 for the goose. That's the part.
Yeah, because that's
about
that's Bob the goose that my grandma fed breadcrumbs to every Wednesday down at the park, right?
right.
Somebody painted Bob the goose. That's how you end up in the fucking local paper, and it becomes a thing, you know? Local man paints Bob the goose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Or
That's,
whatever.
yeah.
The cat that made it famous on the internet. It's just it's what people grasp onto is what all artists are shooting for in the dark. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
But we all keep
right.
trying.
Absolutely.
All right. So
every day.
Let's get into
life. Life is hard and the struggle is real, Jeff. That's the moral of the world. Life is hard and the struggle is real, and it gets worse every day.
Yeah, except what the key to the world is to find what you love and what brings you enjoyment and what makes you happy, and just keep that spinning around all the other hard bullshit that goes on, because that's the key. That's totally the key.
Absolutely.
We all have a choice when we wake up whether we're going to be pissed off, irritated, sad, depressed, and if we don't want to be, we don't have to be, no matter what happens. It's a choice.
I wish somebody put that choice button on my phone in the morning.
That is fucked up.
Right. You're welcome.
Yeah, it's just like, boom. I'll put that.
Fuck all these people.
Exactly. No, I'll just put that button on where you have no choice to push, and it's just be happy. No other choice.
Right. Just Bob Marley, be happy every morning. Just first thing, yeah.
You either don't push the fucking button, or if you're gonna push the button, be happy.
Be happy. Yes. Otherwise, just stay in bed. Just stay in bed.
Yeah. Don't even put a toe out.
Right. Yep. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen, brother. So what I did just when I was thinking about having you on and how fucking happy I was, and that we could do the Zoom thing, and I finally figured this out, that I can pretty much, have you on multiple times now. And It excited me. We've talked on the phone many times, and not many times, a few times, and we've gotten into some details of the history of distilling. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you've made reference to, there's a lot of that distilling right now isn't a new art, it's a lost art, where there's a lot of stuff that's been done many times before, but it just hadn't been done for the last 60, 70, 100 years. And there's an aspect of that can come back. And I just wanted you to take that like a little bit further. I mean, what is some of the stuff that ancient, even if you want to go back 600, 700, 800 years ago or whatever, what are some of the whiskeys or the distilling techniques, or what could you do that's not being done right now?
So there's a couple things that immediately come to mind, and the first thing is, and it's a little hard to delve into an American distilling, but people want to make this distinction mostly because of the TTB and the government and the way that health regulations are nowadays. But certain alcohols are functional alcohols, right? So certain alcohols are more medicine than they are alcohols for enjoyment in whatever way, shape, or form you want to see that. But you can basically trace all beverage alcohols back to medicine in one way, shape, or form, right? So if that's absinthe, you're dealing with two very unique cultures with absinthe in particular, and I'll just use this as an example. You trace distillation out of the Middle East, which is really where it started, right? For rose water and even petrol distillation, essential oils, all those things. The first place that you find it really being practiced is anything that we would recognize as distillation nowadays is in Salerno, Italy. There was a school there, and they weren't so much interested in making beverage alcohols. They were interested in making functional medicines, right? So your gins, your absinthes, your chartreuse, all those things making use of local ingredients to make the alcohol, local ingredients to infuse the alcohol, local ingredients that actually have physiological, mental effects, spiritual effects, etc. Those things all came out of Salerno, Italy. And it's very hard to play to that market because you're very limited in what you can say. Like I can't, as a representative of my distillery, who even in this phrase I won't say the name of because that's how afraid of the TTB I am when it comes to this shit. I can't say that absinthe is a functional alcohol, but it is, right? It's not the alpha-thujone. It's not the possibility of hallucinating because you're not going to hallucinate. It's all the actual physiological effects, all the protective effects, all the antioxidant effects, all the digestive effects. Absinthe is a medicine. That is not my employer saying that. That is me, Alan Bishop, as a distiller saying that. Those are the things, some of the things that we miss out on. Some of the other things that we miss out on that are more obvious to, let's say, the home distilling class or the moonshining class or people that are familiar with distilling from popular culture. We have this idea of retorts or thump barrels or doublers as being a very modern invention, maybe prior to Prohibition, maybe during Prohibition with moonshiners in order to speed up the process, to be able to raise the proof and the purity of distillation in one run as opposed to two to save time, right? That's a very flawed view of what that is. If you look at Caribbean rum, for example, you're going to find retorts, you're going to find doublers, you're going to find thumpers. They're not just there to be able to make alcohol quickly and efficiently. They're there to infuse flavors. They're there to really push that alcohol to the next level, to bring out esters that you wouldn't otherwise taste. You look at something like, and this is very new to the distilling industry, and this is one of those few odd places where moonshining and commercial distilling are finally starting to meet. You look at something like a Tennessee Thumper system built by Rick Gibson. Golden Beaver Distillery out in California just put in a big Tennessee Thumper. Rick Gibson's out there right now tuning that thing in for those guys. And they make good liquor as it is, but they're going to be able to make shit nobody else in California can touch because they have a system that is a very basic system that nobody else understands. And it's literally a system of multiple retorts, multiple doublers. You can literally load every single one of those doublers, which are basically mason jars with different flavor compounds. That seems very new to a lot of people in the distilling industry. It's not. If you go back to the alchemical treatises from the 1400s, you're going to see there were alchemists that were running basic pot stills with 20 retorts, right? And they're doing this for medicinal reasons, but it's also infusing flavor, right? And what if each of those 20 retorts had a different botanical in it, a different compound, right? Where can you take things? How deep can you go? None of that's new. It's all old. None of us are doing anything new. We're just rediscovering things that people have done for hundreds of years. But that plays into part of my philosophy on distillation is that truthfully, and it's a very bold statement, I'm actually writing a book right now and the premise of the book starts with the following. The simple pot still is the single greatest invention of mankind. And I say that understanding everything that we've done in the past 100 and let's call it 20 years. But if you take the simple state of mankind through the Industrial Revolution, none of it, not a bit of it happens without a pot still. All the way down to your drinking water, all the way down to, if you go to a pharmacy in 1910, every pharmacy has got a pot still setting on the counter to make compound medicines. And anything that requires water, to this day, they still teach pharmacists, if you want pure water, you distill it 7 times through a pot still, right? The pot still is the single greatest invention of all mankind. It got us farther than anything else ever has up until this point, up until the post-industrial revolution. It was magic. It's still magic to me. Every time I see liquor come off a still, you might as well pull a fucking rabbit out of a hat because I'm in, right? It just, to me, it's the coolest thing in the world that you can take. There's so much to it that you can take this weird fermented beverage that may not necessarily taste good, that comes off the still, and if you cut it the right way, you take the right compounds out, leave the right compounds in, it tastes great, maybe it has some medicinal functions to it, then you take that white spirit and you put it in a barrel, and 3 or 4 years down the road, you pull that liquid back out, and it's not chemically, it's not the same thing you put in. There's alchemy, there's magic to that, right? And some people have this idea of magic as being some big, grand, overwhelming. I made a board a foot longer, right, with a magic trick. That's an old outside of the Bible tale about Jesus being a carpenter. But to me, magic is a tree growing on a stream bank, and it doesn't fall in, right? It's got strong roots. It stands there. It grows in defiance. To me, that's what magic is. It still is nothing more than the extension of agricultural endeavor and mankind's commitment to how the fuck can I make things suck less than they currently do?
Yeah, and it solved all of our problems up till 1916. Anytime we had to pay anything, they just had to tax the whiskey.
Yep.
And the world was a far less fucking controllable, complicated place back then. And then when they finally in 1916 decided to start taxing everything that exists in our lives, that's when everything started to go way south.
Well, Jeff, if they were drinking absinthe on Jackal Island back in 1916 and maybe smoking a little weed, they'd been like, this sales tax, this income tax thing, bullshit. Yeah. We're not doing this. We ain't going there.
We would have skipped prohibition, that's for fucking sure.
Right?
The only reason why prohibition happened, and then they finally got to realize that, we better start taxing it again, because we just put the country in a fucking depression. And then they try and blame it on the Dust Bowl. Well, the Dust Bowl happened because we didn't need the fucking corn anymore.
Nope. Yeah, and then that was
still.
There was all, even the Dust Bowl side of that, there's always human manipulation. There's always politics. There's always, somebody's always standing to make a little bit of money. And you get done with World War I, and you got all these chemical weapons, and what the fuck do you do with them? Well, now we need chemical agriculture because we got to get rid of all this shit, right? Somebody stood to make a lot of money off of turning certain states out west into deserts. There was incentive. There was incentive to do that for sure. And it's we deeply philosophical moment here, just very quickly, and then I can expound on it if you want me to, or shut the fuck up and go on. But the demons that we fight nowadays in this world, Jeff, this is no shit. This is true Alan Bishop speaking right here. The demons that we fight right now in this world are the same demons that we were fighting 10,000 years ago. They just have different names.
Obviously. I agree. I mean, I don't even think you don't have to go any further on that one. We all know which direction that goes.
Yep.
I mean, even the whole, this is whiskey. We're not going to get political.
Right.
Because even what just happened just recently, it's 100% driven not by anything but money. It wasn't by accident. They didn't need it anymore. They pulled out. It's just
nope. That's absolutely it. And I will say one thing about that real quick, Jeff. I don't know when this will air, but Saturday evening this week, my wife and I were hoping that people have a little vigil just on their own, right? Just light a few candles. I'm not going to get into the reasons. You obviously understand the subject is Afghanistan, and you can take that however you want to. I don't care if you're on the left or the right, but if you don't take, if people don't take a few moments in the next week to think about the things that have happened in the past few days, I'll just tell you up front, I don't need you as a fan, friends, family member. If you can't look out your side of yourself and realize how shitty the world can be, and take a moment and think about the people that have been hurt and will be hurt over the things that are happening.
Yeah, it's emotional. It's like you said, it's a prayer vigil for the people over there that are going to suffer, and the people who are going to be killed. I mean, that's just that fucking simple. It's just going to happen. And Once again, our governments don't make decisions based off of individual people ever. And there's
Absolutely.
never been a government that ever did it. And it's like when people expect it, they're just stupid. It's just fucking stupid. Barrel finished gin, Monks Road. They've got dry gin, Monks Road, and then they've got Monks Road 100 proof 5th District Series bourbon. The first release in our 5th District Series pays homage to Cold Spring Distillery, a historic distillery in southern Nelson County, Kentucky that was located just a stone's throw from the site of our new distillery today. This 6-year-old single barrel bourbon masterfully blends notes of corn, rye, and malted barley for a product that revives the spirit of yesterday.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough in that direction. Let's keep going on the distilling aspect. All right. So the other part, explain. So I've gotten so many different fucking explanations on rectifying. What is a rectifier? So there's bad rectifiers and then there's good rectifiers. Obviously, that's one of the things why I'm so confused. Usually when the answer in whiskey is you're kind of like, is Jack Daniel's bourbon? Well, the answer is yes. But does Jack Daniel's recognize themselves as bourbon? No, they're Tennessee whiskey. So the answer, there's no winning the argument. So whatever side you're on, whether you're new and you think it is or isn't, there's no wrong answer. And it's the same thing here. What is the good side of rectifying? I mean, I'm confused by this. I keep hearing about it and I keep hearing different things to take it even, I mean, there's a really detailed explanation on the good side, right? Of what people do when they.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's really a multifaceted question, Jeff, especially if we're talking about the history of distillation. So there's kind of two versions of rectification. There's true rectification, which is an older art, and there's what I presume you're talking about is merchant bourbon, right? Buying things and making it your own sort of thing. Correct? Is that where we're headed here? Okay. So let's go through both of those versions of it. So true rectification would be if I'm in Peoria, Illinois, Pekin, Illinois, back in the 1800s, and I'm buying farm whiskey, right? And it's not very good. It's not been made well. It's a commodity. There's alcohol there. You can make money off of it. You buy it in, you blend it together, you make good product out of it. You buy it in. It's not worth a shit for blending. You redistill it. You kind of make it your own, hit your own profile, blend it together. There's an art to that, and that old rectification art includes things like absinthe or chartreuse or any of those things where you're not necessarily making the base alcohol. You're buying the base alcohol from producers that are maybe in a more suitable region for that base alcohol. Then you turn it into something of your own, right? What I suspect that you're asking me about is purchasing bourbon or purchasing rye or purchasing whatever your commodity is and trying to find a way to make that your own, correct? Like merchant bourbon. Is that where I'm? Yeah. Okay.
Right. Now there's the people who source, but that's not rectifying, right? Because they're acknowledging that they're not trying to make it their own. Everybody knows it's been done, right?
Yeah. Now there's a gray area there, and this is where we get into strange definitions, right? There's a gray area there where maybe you do make it your own. So best example I can think of is Penelope bourbon. Okay. So they're buying from MGP, they're buying multiple MGP mash bills, and they're one of the few companies using those MGP Seagram's mash bills as component whiskeys the way they were intended to be used, right? So you're taking them, you're blending them together in whatever proportions you decide that your mash bill should be, whatever your character, your profile is. That I have a ton of respect for, especially if they're saying, and they obviously have to sign a non-disclosure. They can't say we buy this from MGP, wherever they're buying it from. I don't know they're buying it from MGP. Let's just say they are. But saying distilled in Indiana, so obviously we make the conclusion, we make the jump, right?
Right.
I have a lot of respect for that. I have some respect for, we bought MGP 95 rye, tastes like fucking cherry cough syrup. We put it in a weird fucking barrel. Here's our weird barrel expression of MGP 95 rye. As long as you're truthful about it, right? As long as you tell people what you're doing, you know, you don't even have to say what distillery it came from. You're just honest about it, and you say, we didn't distill this ourselves. There's an art to that. There's an art to blending. There's an art to making something your own, for sure. Where I have a problem is, you know, fucking Colorado whiskey, right? I'm not going to say the name of the fucking company. Let's just say, you know, Colorado Mountain Whiskey, right? Sounds very manly.
Right.
Not a drop of it distilled in mountains, right? There ain't no fucking mountains in southern Indiana that I've seen. Just throwing that out there. I will tell you that I am very excited about people like Penelope who are doing that the right way, but let's take that to the next level. The next level of rectification might be that maybe you buy low wines from a specific mash bill, so not finished product, and you bring it in and you make the cuts yourself, which is very much so what Copper and Kings was doing with brandy, right? They're buying in low wines from out in California. It's obviously a base wine that's been distilled one time, no cuts have been made to it. You bring it in, you cut it, you make it your own, you age it yourself. I think that's cool. That has merit. There's some pride behind that. You can make that your product, right?
And you do that because grapes grow really well in California, right?
Right. It makes sense. Exactly. It makes sense. Now,
grapes aren't growing as well in Kentucky.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, by the time you buy the entire grape crop in Kentucky, you've got like 6 barrels of brandy. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. That's what you got, because it's just the practicality of those things. The other thing I'm excited about is like the Penelope stuff, you know, using those component whiskeys, make it your own. But I think that there's real levity. People's palates have grown in the past 2 years, past 2.5 years. People are ready for new things, new fun things. So let's make a company, Jeff, you and I, right? And instead of Penelope and using theoretically MGP or Alberta or, you know, Barton, whatever they're using, right? We buy it from craft distillers, right? And maybe what we do is we buy a little bit of low wine, we distill it to our specs. Maybe we have them distill our stuff to our specs with our own yeast strain, etc. That's rectification as well. Maybe we also buy a finished product and we blend craft whiskeys together. And maybe we're not concerned about how it falls in let's say the TTB recognition of what the bourbon category is. Maybe it's just blended American whiskey. Maybe I don't give a shit if Todd Leopold sends me 100% oat whiskey and Iron Root sends me 75% purple corn whiskey, right? Blend those together, right? Make it your own thing. You're after flavor. That's what we're all after, right? We're after flavor. We're after authenticity.
Right.
There's nothing less authentic about that, as long as you do it to your specs. As long as you do it to your specs, you make something good. That stuff to me is exciting. There's a whole category of spirits that disappeared after Prohibition that fall under rectification to some extent, if you're not making them yourself from scratch. But let's say that, you know, I buy some Harbinger from Iron Root, right? What keeps me from buying some base grape brandy from Ossicalis and blend that grape brandy into that grain whiskey, right? That's still rectification. All rectification is you're correcting what you see as flaws as an artist. Now, rectification as far as industrially goes can be, we bought a bunch of farm distilled whiskey and we distilled it up to 190 and it has no flavor, but it can be used for cordials or liqueurs, etc. But I see it as a much wider category than that. I hope that all makes sense. I hope it all tracks. I know it's a little hard.
So the only question I have is, like, let's just take Johnny Walker. They're blenders. They blend. They take fucking barrels from every single Scotch place.
31 distilleries.
Right, and then they. So are they rectifiers, or are they just blenders? I mean, what's the difference?
In my opinion, they are both, and here's the reason I say that. So if they were just blenders, they would take everything as it were, right? They would just be buying commodity product and blending that commodity product to the best of their ability.
Okay.
But because they own those distilleries, they can lay out protocols. They have to hit these these marks. Each and every distillery has to hit this mark to hit that character for that distillery for this blend. In my opinion, that's exactly what a rectifier is.
Okay.
And it's not a dirty word. It's not a dirty art. There was a lot of it here in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, Louisville, Kentucky. You take apple brandy. Here's a great example, Jeff. Back in the 1800s, you get into the Black Forest of Southern Indiana, all the distilleries we talked about in the past, right? The largest buyer of that apple brandy was a man named Thomas Batman in Louisville, Kentucky. And he was known as the brandy king of the United States. He was very particular about what he would buy. He wanted either double pot distilled apple brandy or he wanted 3-chamber apple brandy. He didn't distill anything, not from scratch. He had a couple stills on hand. What he'd do is he'd buy everything out of Indiana. He never bought anything from Kentucky, ironically. He was in Louisville. He didn't buy any apple brandy from Kentucky. It was always Indiana stuff. If he came across something that was bad, he'd redistill it and work it into the blends, right? So rectification is it's literally like being a mechanic, right? You're not the manufacturer of the car, but you can damn sure fix the thing. It might not be the way the company says to fix it, but you can do it.
Okay. That made way more sense to me. I understand that. Now, let's just
got a little something to throw in here.
Okay, Benjamin.
I was going to say, I would throw in, if you're looking just from a distilling standpoint, rectification at its very base form is just simply redistilling the spirit. So if you're doing a stripping run through a pot still and then you're pushing it through a column, you're rectifying it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're doing one run and then you're turning around and you're running it again, and that's where maybe you're making your cuts. You're running it again through a pot still or you're pushing it through a column. You're rectifying it. That's at a very base form. That's literally what that is as well.
Here's a fun view of it too that you might enjoy, Jeff. You take old school distilling technology, right? So you take cognac distillers or Armagnac distillers, right? And they put their brandy in a barrel. They don't call it maturing. They don't call it aging. They call it élevage, right? And élevage means it's a word that relates to children. It means to raise a child, right? So even though they've done everything from start to finish, made everything from start to finish, it's not about what comes off the still, but what comes back out of that barrel. So maybe that's rectification. You're correcting the mistakes, quote unquote, that you made off the still in the barrel to get to an end product that tastes different than what came off the still. So everything could really be considered rectification to some extent, I suppose.
So, all right, I get that. And that's the good explanation of rectifying. So the bad explanation of rectifying is what they were doing during the late 1800s, where they were getting the barrels and they might not have been redistilling, but they were adding flavors and they were putting
some tobacco spit, some plum juice, some mullein in there.
Barrel,
Right. Here's a little creosote. Fuckers will walk it off on Sunday. It'll be okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just go to church.
Yeah, right. Right.
Just go to church.
Now, I will say this. So I mentioned finishing in barrels as a form of rectification. So as a distiller, as a purist, here's one thing that I see is a little bit wrong in the world. You buy a finishing barrel, okay? Let's say, just for shits and giggles, you buy an orange curacao barrel.
Okay.
So a version of bad rectification would be, I took a rye whiskey and I put it in a curacao barrel that still had 3 gallons of curacao in it, right? Curacao is there to cover up any flavors in that rye whiskey. Versus, I bought a curacao barrel, it was dry, right? So the only flavor you're getting is from the wood itself, what's been absorbed into the wood, right? And I balanced the good rye whiskey that I'd already made with what was left of that curacao in that barrel, right? To where when you taste that rye whiskey, you taste the rye whiskey, then you taste the curacao versus, oh, fuck, when I drink this rye whiskey, it tastes like curacao.
So the ultimate one that you're talking about, even though I like the results, would be the Caribbean rum, that the Basil Hayden's Caribbean rum, where they added the Caribbean rum instead of aging it into the barrel. That's a rectification aspect, right?
That's a rectification, yes. It's correcting flaws in the existing product, covering them up with other other things, right? And I'm not going to say the name of the company because I don't want to get sued, but we all know another fairly large company owned by an international conglomerate that makes a rye whiskey, quote unquote, finished with rum barrels. And if you can taste that product and tell me they're not adding molasses / and or rum, I'll quit my job right now.
Yeah, it's like, and what you're looking for off that is just transparency. I mean, if you're going to add rum and molasses, say you added rum and molasses, and then there's a certain amount of people that want to drink that. I mean, it tastes, they want it to taste more delicious. But if you're covering that up, that's where rectification comes in.
100%. At the point in the industry, just be fucking honest, right? So, like, if you make a blend, right? So, and Penelope might even think about this because I think it's cool, right? So instead of here's our market blurb on the side label, let's have a table, and let's have that table say, and this, by the way, TTB actually requires this, but they don't enforce it. Let's have that table say, this mash bill came from DSP whatever, right? Oh, hell yeah, that's a good one. DSP whatever number, right? And this mash bill is 62% rye whiskey from DSP whatever. It's also 15% bourbon from DSP whatever, right? Then it's aged in this barrel from DSP whatever. You're still not violating non-disclosure. People can look up what distilleries they are, but you're not declaring those distilleries, right? Just be transparent about what you do. And I don't even give a fuck if you want to be the dude that, you know, mixes 10% good bourbon in with 90% GNS. Fucking great. Just fucking say you did it and tell me where it's from, right? And if it's good, we'll drink it. If it's good, we'll drink it.
Because you're trying to make a product, and like you said, that's the other. I was just going to ask you about grain neutral spirits. It's kind of like that was a lot of times what rectifiers use. They would add that in, even to the others, certain scotches. I mean, so we just did a thing on Japanese whiskey. I had Young Nose on, and he is in South Carolina. We did the Zoom thing, and we had I've never had Japanese whiskey, and we did the Toki, the Suntory Toki, which is a blend of a lot, but it's still Japanese whiskey. But Japanese whiskey, when I posted that, I did not realize the bad name it got, because they didn't have to. They could buy whiskey from everywhere else.
How hard they leaned on Scotland. Yeah.
And then just have one of the 52 blends be Japanese and call it Japanese, and it pisses people off.
And you know what? There's such an easy, and you know this because of how truthful people want people to be in the industry. It's such an easy fix. All those Japanese companies ever had to do, all they ever had to do was say blended Japanese whiskey or whiskey blended in the Japanese style, right?
Right.
Because we all knew that they're buying stuff from Scotland, right? And granted, they're changing things, whether or not they're setting on it or they're blending it immediately. They're blending it a different style than what you get in Scotland. But the perception that they've given the world now, because they've lied about it for so long, is that why would I buy Japanese whiskey when it seems like all Japanese whiskey really is some Scotch. It's been quote unquote tablespooned, maybe we bought it from Lagavulin with a tablespoon of some other Scotch in it. Now it's no longer Lagavulin. We brought it into Japan, took it right off the tanker truck, and threw a little high proof spirit into it, and threw it in Mizuna barrels, and ta-da, here's the fucking magic of our world, right? Which isn't uncool if you tell people that's what you did. Right.
I mean, they have the barrels. I mean, yeah, exactly. You're putting it in. So, all right. So the last, not the last, but one more thing is why does America seem right now to keep demanding fucking, oak barrels? I mean, you would think that they would want to try other barrels of other woods, because it still can do the same thing. You could char another barrel, any kind of wood, and still get the same thing. It'll just not the same thing, but it would be different. But why is oak? Is it because the barrel doesn't leak as much if you use oak, but what is the purpose of that? You don't, in American whiskey, you're really not finding anything but oak barrels.
So there's a couple reasons for that, and you're on the right track. The first reason is because of populism, right? So we're all familiar with bourbon and its flavor coming from New American oak, and there's a nostalgia for that. And there's my grandpa drank this. There's my great grandpa drank this. This is America, right? This bourbon as an ideal is American exceptionalism, right? That's what it's become. Whether or not that's,
it's become more. I can even take that. It's just become American insanity. I mean,
yes.
It's good. Yep. I'm not saying there's just everybody, but
no. It pays my check. I'll be honest. It pays my check, right?
Yes.
So there's a little bit of you buy into that, right? Yeah, and there's a little music analogy here. Why does a band like the Rolling Stones become popular, but a band like Billy Gibbons' original band, Moving Sidewalks, nobody knows who they are. Not because they're lesser, just because you didn't know who they were, right? And they didn't fit the mold.
Right.
Another part of it is never doubt the power of the lumber and alcohol lobby in the world, right? So if the lumber lobby decides that they want to move a bunch of oak barrels, all they got to do is get in power and stay in power and meet with the right people and, take care of the Midwest vote, and you get these people to vote for us and we'll take care of you. Now, from a practical perspective, from a distiller's perspective, you hit on the other side of it, which is most woods are not good for storing liquids. Let's be honest for a minute here too. Unpopular opinion coming. Barrels are fantastic ingredients and really shitty storage devices, even if they're made out of oak.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There's certainly much more efficient storage devices, right? But we use oak barrels because of the qualities that we get, right? You take Spirits of French Lick. If I'm in the chai cellar, I'm losing 7% a year. If I was at one of the big distilleries, they'd fire my ass in a heartbeat at 7% a year, right? But it gives me the flavor that I want. There have certainly been other barrels used throughout the years. So one of the big whiskeys that was popular in the Ohio Valley in the early 1800s, all throughout northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, southern Indiana, was rye whiskey aged in a hickory barrel, of all things. Apple wood barrels were common. They leak like crazy. But they make great whiskey, right? They're not efficient. And they also don't fit that sort of narrowed spectrum of post-industrial, post-prohibition. Here's what bourbon tastes like. Here's what we're familiar with. Here's what we're comfortable with. They don't fit that aesthetic. We played around with a lot of different barrels at Copper and Kings when I was there. And one of the coolest ones we did was, and I don't know how in the fuck the guy came up with these, Jeff. This is one of the mysteries of the distilling industry as far as I'm concerned. And as far as I'm concerned, you to get these barrels, you probably had to have ties to the Russian mafia. But Greg Gettle, who was the accountant at Copper and Kings, somehow got a hold of some juniper barrels at Copper and Kings. And we aged absinthe in them. And they were leaky as shit. They had knot holes in them, sap holes, all that stuff. You'd put 30 gallons in a barrel. If you got 15 gallons back out of it after 3 or 4 months, you were lucky. But what a cool thing, right? Who the fuck knows what juniper wood tastes like?
Right.
And it's not, I'll be honest with you, it's not good.
It probably
good.
Doesn't taste like juniper. I guarantee you that. It's just
right. It tastes like all of the negative aspects of juniper. It tastes like turpentine is what it tastes like, to be honest with you. But who knew that until you did it? Who even knew you could get those fucking barrels?
Here, I just had an idea. Okay, so would an acorn be considered still oak?
I don't see why not. It falls into the Latin species, right?
So,
just drop that into.
Have people dropped acorns into the barrels before to get a different flavor? Have you ever heard of that? That just hit me out of nowhere.
I've never heard of that. Benjamin just brought up a good point. Acorns are highly tannic. You got to blanch them with water before you do anything. Now, I have seen old school settlers recipes for acorn flour. Yeah. And if you can make acorn flour, you can make acorn whiskey. So I bet somebody's made acorn whiskey.
And then, yeah, that would be distill the acorns and then put it into barrels, using that as one of the.
Why not?
So,
Dude,
historical wood, I would throw out a historical wood that I've had a question about. Maybe Alan can chime in on this. Is because the lost wood also coincides with the chestnut tree. Because chestnut was actually the primary in North America up until the blight took it out in the 1900s. So how popular potentially was chestnut used, American chestnut, for aging or for making barrels?
I'm sure that it was. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I know that a couple of years ago, Lost Spirits out in California, they do rapid aging, all that stuff. But their founder went out and bought antique chestnut furniture and cut it up and used that for rapid aging. Now, I don't know how it turned out, but that was actually part of his theory.
Method and Madness, which is derivative of Jameson over in Ireland, they.
No. All right, let's see. I just lost Alan. Hopefully we can work on. Oh, here he comes back. He's coming back.
All right.
There you go. You're back. Oh,
gotcha.
You guys were just talking about aging in chestnut barrels, and I was pouring myself some Solomon Scott in a spirit of yeah.
Yeah, I don't know this for sure, but I hear that helps fight COVID.
So does I will say that you were talking about medicinal aspects. It's kind of like, I just don't understand why the only medicine that there pretty much was up until they discovered penicillin was whiskey. I mean, for God's sakes, during Prohibition, you could get prescriptions, and it wasn't just because it wasn't just because everybody wanted to fucking drink. It's because it actually had a medicinal purpose. And then the stigma after Prohibition was they didn't push it at all because you have all the different medicines. But I'm a firm believer that just one. I mean through this whole thing, I just have, most of the nights, if I haven't had anything, I'll just have one right before bed. And I can tell you this: I've had a scratchy throat or a little bit of a stuffy nose, and you have one before you go to bed, and you wake up just fine.
Yeah. Post-industrial, post-war, we got all these chemicals left over. What do we do with them? Agriculture and medicine, right? That's where they go. And the beautiful thing about alcohol, and I always say this, alcohol is inherently agricultural, right? We derive all of our alcohols for human pleasure from plants. And the beautiful thing about alcohol is it's a great menstruum. If you're into alchemy, you'll understand that that's kind of the substrate that you absorb things into, you extract things from. The mixture of alcohol and herbs, botanicals, some things do dissolve better in water, but alcohol has a place in the pharmacopoeia of the world, the history of the world. If you think about it, industrial medicine is 100 years old, 150, let's say 150 years old, right?
Right.
That leaves you with 8,500 years, maybe 10,000 years of alcohol and plants, whether that be distilled alcohol, wine, mead, beer, whatever. We've certainly lost a lot. That doesn't mean that people nowadays live longer than they did 200 years ago, but I'm not sure they lead better lives than they did 200 years ago, right? We made it through the Black Plague fine. Talking about Solomon Scott, one of the cool things about that, one of the reasons I named it Solomon Scott, is because during the Spanish flu epidemic, Solomon was already dead, but his daughter and his son had taken over for him, Bill and Howard Scott, in Paoli Township of Orange County, Indiana. And Spanish flu hit Orange County and Washington County very, very hard, to the extent that there's actually a graveyard on the county line, Livonia Cemetery, where there's an area that's literally marked area of unknown dead, just mass graves, right? Doctors wouldn't come to anybody, wouldn't help them out. And the Scott family, they were known for making what was called rock and rye, so rock candy and rye whiskey. And Howard and Bell would go around from house to house. Anybody they knew that had Spanish flu that needed help, they'd take them a quart of fucking rye whiskey with rock candy in it. And to this day, there are people in Paoli Township and Stampers Creek Township that thank the Bell family, or the Scott family, sorry, thank the Scott family for saving them from the Spanish flu, because they'd have died out otherwise, right? Nobody else was knocking on their door trying to help. You know, it's just alcohol is nothing more than a substance that opens and closes doors. And sometimes they are doors far beyond what we think they are.
I 100% agree with that. It's just there was a quote out of New York. The woman said there were those of us who drank whiskey and those of us who didn't, and the ones who did survived and the ones who didn't. And it was, I mean, that was a pandemic that basically cut the world population. There's no doubt. I mean, the percentage of people that died off of that, and the fact that they don't still push this aspect of it is just, that's another reason why the whole thing that happened is a bunch of shit. They should have been telling everybody to go out and buy some whiskey and have a pour per night, you know, the whole time. Can't hurt, can it?
Oh, I'll even no, for sure. I'll even make a qualitative joke out of it. So it's no secret that I'm not a fan of 95% MGP rye, right? I understand why people like it.
Me neither.
But why in the fuck would you ever drink why would you ever fucking drink Robitussin if you can buy MGP 95% rye? Does the same thing. Tastes pretty much the same way, right?
Yep.
Drink some MGP and walk it off.
I mean, and you know, I'm not a huge fan of rye. And then I realized at one point, the ryes that I'm not a fan of are any MGP rye. The bullet rye aspect of it, there's aspects of it I can't stand. It's not that it's just my palate. It's just like the one thing I want to put out every time I have is MGP rye. It's just like, if it's MGP rye under another name, I can tell instantly, you know,
where it came from.
And I don't like it. I guess it makes a great Bloody Mary. I mean, if you put it, I mean, it's got all the flavors, dill pickle, and for me, and celery and all that stuff. So if you mix that with the Bloody Mary mix, I'll drink that. I've done that before. But as far as trying to drink it as whiskey, it's just like, yuck.
Yeah, it's a component whiskey. It was meant to be blended for sure. You know, that's what it was there for, and it was never meant to be marketed as its own product. And more power to the marketing team up there, that they figured out they could move that to craft distillers. And if you like it, you like it. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying shit whiskey.
Right. But some people like shit whiskey, and they're allowed to, and we're not going to rip on them. But this question, the question I had was, so we're going through history, you know, and just like when certain things throughout history, consistency used to be one of the things. So this is a twofold question. One, I understand that different strains of yeast make whiskey taste different. There's no doubt. You've captured yeast. You understand yeast. But like, for instance, you hear the stories of J.W. Dant, and you hear the stories of all, you know, how they protected their yeast strain. Now, were they protecting that yeast strain because 100% that kept their consistency of their product tasting the same, or were there other reasons for protecting that yeast strain? You know, because I know coming up until just recently, you know, when you're talking about Jim Beam, the goal of Jim Beam has been, you know, is at that whiskey or any other base whiskey of a large distillery is to make that taste the same. So when the consumer buys that bottle, they're getting what they want to taste, which is a big part of the population. Now, as a craft distiller, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and that's not your ultimate goal. You're trying to make a good product, and then I think you have a flavor profile, but you have no problem that if as things go along, trying to improve upon that flavor profile. The consistency isn't as important to a craft distiller as it is to the base product of a major distiller. But back in history, up until it was almost impossible to keep that consistency.
Right.
So that's a two-part question.
So kind of a two-part answer for you on that is that when it comes to consistency with craft whiskey, especially with pot stills, there is no consistency. Your consistency does not come from a pot still. You will never get consistency from a pot still. There's too many variables. Every single day, something changes. You don't create consistency from a pot still. You create it over time by blending profiles to meet a profile, right? There's no other way to approach pot still distillation. Early on, let's say late 1700s in Kentucky, early 1800s in Indiana, people expected inconsistency. It was what it was. It's all an agricultural product, so it's always going to change. When it comes to the yeast and it comes to consistency and it comes to those big companies, especially let's say the big 6 or 7 central Kentucky companies who have had excellent marketing teams for over 100 years, right? They focus on yeast because it's a tangible asset, right? It's something that is just common enough that normal people understand what yeast does, right? And it's just uncommon enough that normal people don't understand what yeast does. So if you're a distiller in the late 1700s, early 1800s, yeast is very important. Maybe not for the reasons that you think it is. And yes, it does have a major, major effect on spirit quality. Maybe up to 15, 20%, even in a finished product. That's what we're seeing right now at Spirits of French Lick. But early on, the reason they're protective of their yeast is because it's really hard to get a good yeast strain, right? You better have a good brewer around. You better have a good bread baker, somebody you can get yeast from. With the Kentucky distillers, they've made more of it back pre-prohibition, post-prohibition, especially with, and even Mike Veach is guilty of this, and I love Mike to death, but he'll say, oh, Kentucky's just primed for yeast propagation. No, what Kentucky was primed for was the fact that 6 of the 7 big distilleries had a beam distilling for them, and 6 of the 7 big distilleries used the same beam fucking yeast strain, right? And maybe it changed over time, but they're all doing things the same way off the same fucking yeast strain. But it's easy to make a mystery out of the yeast strain because the general public doesn't really understand what yeast does. So it's important.
So as they branched out, they let them take the yeast to the different distilleries.
I don't know that I would say that the beams that the companies let the beams do it. I'd say that the beams just said, fuck you, I'm taking it elsewhere, right? They just said, fuck you, this is ours. This is our family thing. My buddy over there, if I'm a beam and my cousin's a beam and we're at 2 different distilleries, I ain't going to let him make bad whiskey because it don't just look bad on his company. It looks bad on our family, right?
That makes
so
sense.
We know this yeast makes good whiskey. Fucking here you go, right? That's one less variable. And again, yeast does have a major effect, but less so than what marketing in Kentucky would let on, because those 6 or 7 big distilleries, all but one of them, Wild Turkey's the only one, right? They all use a yeast strain originating from beam post-prohibition / the end of prohibition. A lot of the Pennsylvania distilleries use the same yeast strain from Everett Beam, who brought it to Pennsylvania, right? It's a family legacy. It's not a company legacy sort of thing. But then that also plays into how yeast does affect things. So if those 6 or 7 big distilleries are all using that same strain, they're all using similar mash bills, and then you have a craft distillery, a farm distillery, whether it be the 1800s or now, not using the same mash bill and not using the same yeast, right? Now you're making a differentiated product. And it's fine to make that differentiated product, and it's fine to make it on a pot still that's not consistent. You know, your whiskey is going to be heavier bodied in the summer than it is in the wintertime. Winter, you got a little bit more reflux, a little lighter style whiskey. Summer, a little heavier style whiskey. That plays into the actual character of that distillery, right? So you're throwing your profile that much further off. But when it comes to your mainline products, not your single barrels, your mainline products, the stuff you release every day for, you know, the blue collar workers, the guys busting their fucking knuckles 40 hours a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be consistent. But what that means is that you, as a distiller, because your company can't afford to hire someone else, you better be a good fucking blender too, right? You better be able to go in and look at those barrels and go, this is different from this, and here's how I grade this, and I need so many of number 1 to blend with number 2 to blend with number 3, and I need 10% of number 4 to match this profile.
So how the fuck do you learn that? I mean, so you know what you like. I mean, for fuck's sake, it's like you're starting the distillery, you know what you like, and you do your first batch. But how the fuck does the second batch, where you're just like have a bunch of barrels different, how do you get to that point where it's going to be the same flavor, consistency, you know, the profile? I mean, is it just a skill that you were born with? Or do you have to drink a shit ton of fucking whiskey?
I think you can be trained to do it over time to some extent if you're of the right mind. You can be from wherever and be able to figure this out. But I don't know. I think it's the same as like West staple, right? Let's take persimmon pudding. I don't know how big that is where you're at, Jeff, but here in Southern Indiana, it's a big thing. You know your grandma's persimmon pudding, right? You understand it. You might not, she never made it the same way twice, but it always tastes the fucking same, right? Because
Right.
the persimmons weren't the same every year, right? Maybe she tasted them, they weren't sweet as they normally are. Here's a little brown sugar, right? There's no real hard recipe. It's just perception, and it's just cultural understanding, right? It's either innate or it isn't, right? And if it becomes, here's what I'll say about that, I guess, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way. If it's not innate, and this is the fun part about bourbon, whiskey can become cognac real quick. All right. So the defining characteristic of cognac is it's very mineral, right? And as long as you hit those mineral notes and you don't have too many fruit notes and you don't actually taste the grapes, you're cognac, right? There's not a huge gulf between Martell and Hennessy. Not really. Not anything that would be in a blind tasting noticeable to 95% of people. But there's a big difference between Wild Turkey and Spirits of French Lick.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is for 95% of the people, the difference is like, for instance, even with Beam, because for instance, I actually think the last 10, 15 years of aging in the Kentucky, Indiana area has been ideal for aging. Okay, there's a lot of hot summers and whatever, but there's got to be stretches which aren't ideal for aging. So when you get this, you're trying to match these profiles, and these barrels keep coming up, but you still have what you're saying is with 95% of the people, and if someone's looking for consistency, 95% of the people aren't going to tell a 15% switch this way or that way. They are not going to pick it up. But that other 5% might pick it up, but they're just like, who the fuck cares, right? That's what craft distilleries are for. That's what, you know, they're higher end, they're small batches and everything, which doesn't even come close to selling what Beam and Jack Daniels does on a daily basis.
It's a niche thing, and I would add to that 5% that you talked about. That 5% is what, you know, signs my paycheck, right? Yeah. And they're going to notice, and they're going to call you the fuck out on it in a fucking heartbeat, right? They're going to make an example out of you and crucify you, and that's what makes it fun and makes it dynamic. But I also think that they expect that out of you, right? They don't expect everything to be the same. I would say of that 5%, 90% of that 5% shops at the farmer's market and understands that, you know, you're not going to grow a fucking papaya in southern Indiana, right? And if you do, it's probably not very good, right? Right. They understand that. They get that.
But if you try, cool, they'll think it's cool you did, and then they'll be like, oh, you grew one, but they'll excuse the difference between a papaya grown in Mexico or Southern California.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And the people who expect consistency, right, the 95%, they're not our market anyways, right? So if they expect consistency, I expect that they don't spend a whole lot of their time in life being critical of a whole lot of anything, truthfully, right? They don't and I'm not knocking everybody. There's a very globalist mentality about quality nowadays, right? And I'm probably not trying to market myself to them. They're probably not the ones signing my paycheck, right? If their concern is, oh, the Spirits of French Lick doesn't taste like fucking Basil Hayden. Yeah, you're goddamn right it don't, and go fuck yourself. You know?
If you want Basil Hayden, fucking buy Basil Hayden instead of go fuck yourself. Just buy Basil Hayden.
No, it's very much go fuck yourself. And if I was Mark Brown, I would actually put out a product called Go Fuck Yourself, ancient, antique, limited edition, secondary market, fuck you, this is actual retail. That's where I would be at in life.
Yeah, but just so you know, that fucking thing, if you were behind it, would sell. You wouldn't be able to keep it on the shelves. It's just that's a great
thing. That's the other part of the problem, right? Yeah. The more it's almost like I always compare whiskey distilling to pro wrestling. It's almost like when CM Punk 10 years ago did the mic drop thing about WWE, you know, basically fuck you, Vince McMahon. Everybody got behind CM Punk, and I'm sure CM Punk was like, well, fuck, now it's even harder to get over with these fucking people, right?
Exactly.
Now it's not so easy to just go out and talk shit, and they get it.
They were playing the game. Now he's part of the game. It's just, and it's all that there's a certain aspect that's the game. But, you know, you were talking about the 5% of what, and honestly, what I'm looking for, which craft distillery after craft distillery basically delivers to me, is that as it goes forward, you get a product as it ages or what's coming through, that it just gets a little bit better. And it seems like most craft distilleries are delivering better all the time. Yeah, you might have a 2-year whiskey. You could taste the grains, you could taste everything, but there's a little bit of young aspect to it. And you're just, but at the same time, it's not like it's selling for $150 a bottle. It's and you can enjoy it. You know, it's there. You can tell there's quality, and you can get behind it. But then when it comes out as a 4-year, then it's like, holy shit, this is getting good. And then if it starts getting further as it keeps going, it's just fun to grow up with the craft distillery. There's no doubt about it. And then the bigger the more that the craft distillery is supported, the bigger it gets.
Absolutely, the floodgates open, and if craft whiskey is guilty of one thing, it's of almost destroying itself before it started. Because for years, the people who got into starting distilleries were people who had money and no experience, right? and I'm guilty of this too. I've certainly gone into liquor stores and seen labels and been like, I know such and such ought to buy that. But I'm still, even to this day, hesitant to buy it, right? I'll look at a label and be like, $45. For me, $45 a week is a lot of money. I can buy 2 bottles of fucking Old Forester, right? I know exactly what I'm getting, right? Whereas, you know, because of my bias from 5-6 years ago, buying craft whiskey and spending $45 on a bottle and being like, what in the fuck is this? Because they've never distilled before, right? And it's very much a hard industry. Like you're gonna learn quick what works and what doesn't work, and you better not be shy, because people are gonna fucking tell you whether your whiskey is good or not. And the thing about it is, if you got in early on the craft whiskey market, you either had just enough money to hold on, or you're out of business by now. And that's all there is to it, right? And you had just enough money to hold on to where you figured out what you were doing, right? And you got good at it because you had to, because otherwise you ain't paying a fucking light bill, right?
Right.
And then finally, 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm just going to say this out in the open, Jeff, and I'll give you a little exclusive funsies here, who says things like, nobody will hire you if you're a home distiller / moonshiner. Fuck you. If you're a smart business owner, you're going to hire a fucking home distiller. And that's why craft distilling has gotten better, because they've hired home distillers and moonshiners, because these fucking people don't have no fucking money, right? They're hardworking fucking people busting their knuckles 40 hours a week at a fucking factory, coming home making whiskey because they fucking want to, and they get goddamn good at it. And that's who you want to you don't want to hire somebody out of a school, right? You want to hire somebody that's figured out how to do this the hard way, right? That's right. What's made us all better. That's what's made all of these craft distillers better.
Well, and then there's a couple of Ohio distilleries that craft distilleries that I've been down to, and one of the aspects is there's one where they basically hired Aaron Harris. He came from, first he was at Barton's, and then he was at Lux Row, and they pulled him up, and it wasn't their distilling wasn't the problem at Watershed where he's at. It was understanding how to take the whiskey they had and blend it. The blending aspect was the problem. And now that they've been around for 11 years, so they've been producing whiskey for a long time, aging it. So they've got and then also and blending is, like you said, getting your flavor profile, making it, there's understanding how to do that. They're really good marketers in Ohio. They sold the shit out of their first go round. It's like everywhere. It was everywhere. It's at every bar. But I wasn't a huge fan of it. It tasted young. It just wasn't, it's like I can taste it. I was at a place and they served gelato with bourbon on it, right? And I'm just like, that's Watershed, just regular Watershed. Right. And I'm not a fan. But when I went down there with Aaron, I was excited he was there, and he knows what he's doing, because they're bottled in bond, and what they put out is now similar to what the Spirit of French Lick is doing. It's definitely a craft distillery. It doesn't taste like Kentucky whiskey, but there's an aspect that's phenomenal, that's really good about it, that is no longer like you're not going yuck.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a good Ohio example. Somebody doesn't get talked about enough, and we're both friends with them. You take Gervasi or Dayton Barrel Works, Bill Hockett. You know what his background is?
Oh yeah, that's
Popcorn fucking Sutton. You know what? Bill Hockett to this day, Jeff Moeller, and I've got a lot of friends in that circle, and you know that.
Yep.
Bill Hockett is the only motherfucker on the face of this planet that I can prove worked with Popcorn Sutton, and nobody gives that enough fucking credit, right? He learned the hard way, and you know what? He called Popcorn Sutton himself. Called him. He made the connection. He went down there because he wanted to learn. Do you know how dedicated? Can you imagine being, in 2005, 2004, seeing Popcorn Sutton on PBS, wherever you saw him at, right?
Right.
And being brave enough to call him and being like, can I come fucking hang out this weekend? I want to learn some shit, right?
Exactly.
And that's where Bill learned at, right?
Yeah.
That's badass. That's badass. That's how you learn. You humble yourself and you go, I ain't even from the South, but I'm going to go down there and I'm going to learn some shit and I'm going to apply this and do something with it, right?
Yeah.
It's humility. That's beauty.
I agree. I mean, I met Bill right as he was leaving Gervasi, and he also worked with Stephen Beam at Limestone, if I'm not Limestone.
He did.
Yeah, and I think it was at the time Lisa Roper worked. Did they cross paths too? I think they did.
They did momentarily. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
and you know, I respect the hell out of Bill, and actually I just been. Initially, he left and he had that, you know, the whole barrel rotation thing that we're all familiar with for Gervasi.
Yeah.
And he had the one barrel that he knew was really good and let it age an extra year, but he left before it was bottled, and I was able to get him a bottle of that. So I just sent it up to him. I picked it up and sent it up to him. He deserved it.
That's awesome. Yeah. People like Bill are Bill Hockett, Kelly Tennille, Hunter Coffee down at Three Boys, Michael Stallings, even though he doesn't work at a distillery right now. Those people are the future of distilling because they have the passion for it, right? It's not cheap to do. It's not easy to do. It's not fun to do at home, but they're doing it, they're learning it, and then they're taking it to the masses, right? And the fun of it, Jeff, is this, you know, you're expanding that spectrum of what we expect whiskey, what we expect bourbon to be. And again, you're not creating anything new. You're just repeating old steps, even if you don't know they're old, but you're not afraid to do it, right? So you get good. And you know what? If you're a moonshiner, you get good real fucking quick, especially if that's where your money's coming from, right?
Yeah.
'Cause you got to eat. You got to take care of your family. You got to be careful. You got to not get busted, right? You're paying more attention to what such and such who knew somebody down at fucking, you know, whatever distillery in Kentucky, you know, and we're a cousin of such and such, and I got in, and here's where I am, and I swept floors for 2 months before I got to run the still, yeah, because you had such a fucking hard life, okay. Right? That's what's going to make craft distilling. And the other thing that's going to make craft distilling is you can talk to all these people, right? You and I can talk, right? And there's no pretentious bullshit. There's no me pretending to be somebody I'm not. There's no marketing fucking angle here. You know, we've done this whole interview and I've mentioned my distillery twice, right? Because fuck that. I don't have to promote it, right? It is what it is. I'm promoting myself. I'm promoting the art of distillation. And I think people respect that and they understand that, you know, and they love it. And they like people they can identify with. And there's a reason that shows like Moonshiners got popular, and it's because people missed out on what was legitimate, right? What was real.
Well, but when you analyze moonshine, okay, you're talking about an unaged spirit that is something that just that white dog is. For the general public, if you understand what it's gonna be, and when you taste it, it's good, but it's like it's not something that everybody's drinking. But then, what a moonshiner is taking that unaged and making it taste delicious. Like they're all about transforming that, adding the botanicals, adding the certain things, adding everything they have to add. Yes, it's good. It's good spirits. It's what they're doing. They have to to have a good starting point. But it's, you know, even just when Limestone Branch Distillery started, they made moonshine, and that got them through before everything.
TJ Pottinger, that was great. It was good.
Yeah. And it's like, but that's the key to understand what you're trying to sell to somebody, because if you don't make it taste good, and you don't know how to do that, nobody's going to want it. It's like it actually has to taste good.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of larger craft distilleries hiring these local, you know, moonshiners, is a local moonshiner really understands not only making whiskey and blending whiskey, because again, you got to make good stuff to sell good stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they also understand the regionality, right? There's a regionality to Spirits of French Lick, for example. You know, we are the Black Forest of Southern Indiana. We represent the distilling heritage of the Black Forest of Southern Indiana. We represent that particular style. Now, people in multiple different states like that style because they've never had it before. But if I wander off of that style, it's no longer the Black Forest of Southern Indiana, and suddenly we've lost something. And I think Spirits of French Lick would be much less special if we were just copying Old Forester, right? But we're not copying Old Forester. We're tied to our local food shed. We're tied to our local traditions. We're tied to our local culinary preferences, right? And there's a real hunger for that in the world, right? The real hunger for that authenticity. There's a real hunger for people who are making your spirits that you can identify with. People who may or may not get drunk and post on Facebook, go fuck yourself. You know, it's out there.
May or may not.
Right. It's out there. And those people may or may not be as surprised as anybody else when they don't wake up in the morning to a barrage of text messages about go fuck yourself, right? But more often than not, people like authenticity. If you can walk the walk, they'll let you talk the talk, as it were, right? You can talk shit as long as you can back it up.
I agree with that 100%. And realistically, there's a certain part, especially if you're a craft distiller like yourself, there's a certain part of the whiskey drinking population that still love the aspect of kick ass, take names, but also they've been refined to also enjoy the spirit to the point where they're not just chugging the shit out of it. But, you know, when you're a craft distillery, you don't have to sell 500 million bottles. You have to sell what you make. And the reality of being a real person with feelings and giving a shit, and I'm not saying that's a marketing ploy, that's just reality, and reality will support a craft distillery any day of the week. It's like what the worst thing a craft distillery would do is just do some pretentious marketing with a bunch of bullshit, and that would be the end of it. It's got to be real. They got to actually be participating and giving a shit about the community, and as long as they do that, they're going to be around.
So yeah, everybody likes the outlaw mentality, right? So it's to hell on a fast horse, but you better have a nice saddle.
Yeah. Right. I mean, but like you've always said, you don't represent at all times the spirit of French Lick. You're not representing them. You're not saying this is what their opinions are. Now, like you said, you have to separate yourself, but there's an aspect of that they make a shit ton of money off of because people love you and they want real, and you are the realest person that out there, and you put yourself out there. There's a lot of people who are you know, distillers at the big distilleries. You know, they're out there. They do the interviews, they do the stuff, they talk about what they're doing, but they're just talking about the whiskey. They're not talking about life. They're not talking about the aspect of that part of the whiskey drinking, because whiskey drinking is, in a lot of people, it's life. And it's funny because the majority of the whiskey drinkers that think that it's life are purchasers of the everyday bottle of those big distilleries.
Yes. Yeah, and for anybody out there who likes to root for the little guy, the outlaw, the guy that speaks out whether or not it's good for his career or not, this ties into a whole other thing about what's your intellectual property worth, which is a whole nother problem in the industry. So I would encourage you to write to me, including a check at the Alan Bishop Charitable Hope Foundation, That's 5602 South State Road 60, Pekin, Indiana, 47165. And give me a little hope, you know, just, I mean, $5 a day almost buys a pack of cigarettes, really, you know. You know, support your local weird-ass distiller, especially on International Alan Bishop Day, October 20th, 2021. International Alan Bishop Day. For any of those listening from overseas, all it takes to be international with a holiday is one person outside of the United States. You can be Canada. You guys don't really count, but I'll take it. Right. You just change your profile picture to me in the chalker, right? Send me a check for $5 and I'll feel good about myself. Really. I mean, one check for $5. I'll be like, God damn, somebody was listening to that shit.
It's like people helping people.
Yes. Yes. People helping people be assholes. Reformed assholes of the North American continent. There we go. Reformed, but not proper. Yes.
You just cover the whole North American continent. In Mexico and Canada. Just keep
There's assholes everywhere.
Yes.
Right.
Why don't you just go worldwide? There you go. Fuck the continent. Just go worldwide. I think there's a lot more assholes overseas than there are here.
I'll tell you, yeah. I'll know when I've won in this world, and I'll know when I'm happy. And that's when I can for sure verify that the name Alan Reed Bishop is on the CCP fucking hit list. I'll leave happy.
Now that is a goal.
Yes.
Yeah, it would kind of be rough to do that from here because I really don't think they give a shit what happens here. They got enough fucking problems over there.
I keep trying, man. I mean, listen. I've never seen her, but I'd fuck Xi Jinping's daughter.
Many times, right?
Yes. Yes. Repeatedly. In the name of freedom.
And whiskey.
Yes. Yes. Craft whiskey.
All right, man. You answered a lot of my questions, and it just took it further. My understanding. I had a couple more, but we're at almost 2 hours, so I know you guys need to get back to doing what you were doing.
No, we don't. We need to go eat. We need to go eat. What we need to do. Eat and go to bed. That's a great idea.
There you go. So I'm going to take us out with The Doors.
Wash away the way to the next